Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, DOD is set to cut back on mandatory cybersecurity training, and the federal judiciary touts cybersecurity progress in the wake of its latest major breach. It's Monday, October 6th, 2025. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's dive into the day's top headlines. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a new edict last week to reduce the time personnel spend on cybersecurity training, among other reforms. The directive came in a September 30th memo to senior Pentagon leadership and DOD agency and field activity directors, ordering the military departments in coordination with the Pentagon's chief information officer to, quote, relax the mandatory frequency for cybersecurity training. Hegseth also called for narrowly tailoring records management training to service member roles and allowing flexibility in training delivery, as well as automating information management systems to eliminate training requirements. Additionally, he directed the military departments and other Pentagon leaders to, quote, relax the mandatory frequency for controlled unclassified information training, remove Privacy Act training from the Common Military Training List, eliminate the mandatory frequency for combating trafficking in persons refresher training after appropriate legislation is enacted, consolidate mandatory training topics as appropriate, and develop an integrated CMT program plan. The changes are to be implemented expeditiously per Hegseth's directive. Hegseth wrote in the new memo, quote, the Department of War is committed to enabling our warfighters to focus on their core mission of fighting and winning our nation's wars without distraction. Mandatory department training will be directly linked to warfighting or otherwise be consolidated, reduced in frequency, or eliminated. In other news, federal courts are upgrading their cybersecurity on a number of fronts, but multifactor authentication for the system that gives the public access to court data poses, quote, unique challenges, the Administrative Office of the United States Courts told Senator Ron Wyden in a letter last week. Wyden, a Democrat of Oregon, wrote a scathing August letter to the Supreme Court in response to the latest major breach of the federal judiciary's electronic case filing system. The director of the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts responded on behalf of the Supreme Court. It is, quote, simply not the case, unquote, that the courts have, in the words of Wyden, ignored advice from experts on securing the case management/electronic case file system, wrote Robert Conrad Jr., director of the office. Conrad wrote in that September 30th letter, quote, substantial planning for the modernization effort began in 2022, and we are now approaching the development and implementation phase of the project. We expect implementation will begin in the next 2 years in a modular and iterative manner, unquote. In recent years, the office has been testing technical components on its modernization effort and is centralizing the operation of data standards to enable security, Conrad said. Wyden took the office to task for not enabling phishing-resistant multifactor authentication. Conrad wrote that the office was in the process of rolling out MFA to the 5 million users of PACER, the public case data system. Specifically, he said, quote, the judiciary has unique challenges in implementing MFA due to the significant diversity of users, with PACER users ranging from sophisticated high-volume data aggregators and well-resourced law firms to journalists and ordinary citizens to indigent litigants. Conrad went on to say that while all PACER users need access to court records, some don't have traditional forms of MFA that they can use, and the design and implementation of the judiciary's MFA implementation requires consideration of those unique needs. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Daily Scoop podcast, available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people to find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back tomorrow with more top headlines. Until then, I'm your host, as always, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.